What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the Opinionated Hippie, continuing my deep dive into Frank Zappa's All Things Ever Alive that's out there available in the world. Started this deep dive with the third leg of the Summer Fall 1974 tour, my favorite tour, not just the third leg, the entire tour. This is sort of the iconic lineup of George Duke, Napoleon Murphy Brock, Tom Fowler, Chester Thompson, Ruth Underwood, Frank Zappa. I think I got all six of them. You Can't Do That on Stage. To essentially your one size fits all, your token of his extreme. A lot of recent concerts have been released, Zappa Erie, one I'm going to talk about today that was released in the Apostrophe box set. So today I got two Ohio shows. I'm going to talk about them, rank them among all the others from this leg of the tour so far. Still wearing glasses because of the blepharitis. Plus it's early in the morning and the eye's always worse early in the morning. But we're going to start off with 11/19/74. This is a Columbus, Ohio show at the Veterans Memorial. Saw a really good Fish show there once. A really, really good Fish show there once. And this is a bootleg tape. This is not an official release. The sound is probably the biggest issue for this show, and it's definitely going to influence where I rank this, because it's this show and the one that follows, the one I'm going to talk about next from 11/20, almost have the identical same set list up until the very end of this show. And because the sound on this is kind of rough, you get a lot of dropouts, you get a lot of weird warbles in the middle of songs, where like a solo will be happening and the tape will go regurgitate back sound like 10 seconds later. It's kind of a rough listen. And the middle portion of this show, from like Village of the Sun, Penguin, To Mercy Dog Meat, Girl, Dynamo, are all pretty much the same exact set list that's on the following show. And so the sound quality is necessarily gonna like drop this one way to the back of the list. The problem with this show is the first two solos and the first two real songs, Stinkfoot and Redunzel, and then the last two quote unquote real songs, Montana, and then the George hitting his finger before we get a cut into whatever happens after that, are fantastic. And like, if this was officially released and the sound was really high quality and like I could hear everything, as well as it sounds on that Apostrophe release or as well as it sounds on Zappa Erie, I'd probably rank this much higher, because I really think that even if you don't track down to own this show, I almost think it's definitely worth checking out on the internet, check it out on YouTube, simply for the first two solos and simply for what happens at the end. It's not a complete show either. We have a really bad cut in the middle of Penguin, which is rough because that's usually one of the better solos. We get cut during that solo. We get cut during George's things. We don't know what happens after George does his thing. Though, based on trends in this tour, probably goes into the encore, and then the encore is probably either a Pygmy Twilight, Room Service, or a Don't Eat the Yellow Snow. Probably Don't Eat the Yellow Snow. But what do we get? We get a really long, like, this is an audience show. So we get like 3.5 minutes of tuning before Tush 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 kicks in. We get your typical Tush Tush Tush. Then we get an awesome high energy Stinkfoot. The solo is actually kind of nasty. Frank is full on attacking. It's like as soon as the solo starts, I'm like, okay, sound quality, you are forgiven. I can hear the solo. I can hear the energy. This is absolutely fantastic. The ideas Frank has are fully developed. He's ready to play. We don't get any of that weird sort of 74 things are falling apart energy. Absolutely fantastic solo. And I've said many, many times that as Stinkfoot solos go, generally the show goes. After that, we get a Redunzel. And the Redunzel might be the best Redunzel of the tour so far, at least this leg of the tour. It's dynamic. It has that classic Redunzel energy, which I would describe as, it doesn't have this volcano energy where we're starting like sparse and kind of all over the place and we kind of coalesce as the solo goes and reach this peak. It's one of those that kind of almost stays like even keeled and level-headed the entire time, but because Frank is like maybe referring to previous ideas or building our ideas, there's this intensity. It just kind of slowly builds over the course of the solo. And even if Frank like lets it fall apart and that 74 entropy starts to threaten, it still maintains that sort of like building intensity. And this is just one of those classic Redunzel solos. Dynamic, you just get these nice waves of energy where Frank pushes it and lets it off the pedal, and pushes it and lets off the pedal. The band, of course, the support is fantastic. Like, if this wasn't officially released and we had this really clear sound, I mean, I think right off the bat, we're like talking possibly one of the best shows just based on the Stinkfoot Redunzel solos. These are fantastic. Then we go into a typical run of songs that, because of the sound, are probably not something you're going to listen to a lot from this show. The Village of the Sun, Echidna's Arf of You, which kind of sounds cool early because the mix gives it a little heavier vibe. Don't You Ever Watch That Thing, Frank's solo, and this is pretty melodic. Somebody named Craig Pincus is watching Ruth, and he doesn't know if Ruth is nothing more than a, and then we go off into solo. We don't know what Ruth is nothing more than of either. The segue into Penguin in Bondage after a little drum solo is pretty sweet. Unfortunately, we get a pretty bad cut during the Penguin solo, and then we jump all the way to the drum solo at the end of this before Tamershi. We get a nice Tamershi Dog Meat Girl. The audience is really enjoying the girl. We get a Dynamo hum with your typical audience participation. And then we get an absolutely fantastic Montana. This solo is dramatic. Frank's on the low end of the notes quite a bit. It's funky my eyes watering. It's funky, but in a really weird, not typically Montana funky way. Frank kind of stays focused for the entire time, and it really isn't until the end of the solo that he threatens to go into that 74 entropy. But as soon as he does, it just like it coalesces again, like, we're not going to do that. We're not falling apart this time. He flirts with a little Inca Rhodes energy for a little while, like a mutated Inca quote. It's patient, it's spacey. The drum work is absolutely incredible. Like, it's just a wow of a solo. And it's, if you're familiar with 74, like, there are these moments when the solos are just going and the energy is fantastic, and it's almost like Frank wants to purposely just like let entropy take over and things fall apart. You're like, okay, there goes that momentum, and then he rebuilds it back up, and it's frustrating at first, but it's ultimately why I love this tour more than anything else, because it's so unpredictable. The one time that wormhole, that 74 entropy threatens, it just like goes off on this weird spiraling run as Frank tries to push it, but the band keeps him together. I don't know. I just think the Montana solo on here is such an absolutely incredible vibe. And this weird, dramatic vibe carries over into the George action, because we get this very futuristic synthy tone. And when we go into like the jam part of it, the improv jam part kind of reminds me of stuff that we would get when Ralph Humphrey was the drummer. And it wasn't very funky. It was more proggy, more King Crimson-ish. There's almost a Synclavier vibe to this, where it almost sounds like weird programmed music as the band's doing this really weird electronic proggy, like, it's funky, but not in like your typical 73, 74 funk, let's dance vibe, but funky in a weird, spacey, futuristic. Eventually, it just fades out. We don't know what happens after this. My prediction is we go into the encores. They weren't. Dupree's was sadly dropped, it seemed, by this point. And it is kind of long what we do get, and I can imagine it going for maybe 4 or 5 minutes longer. But it's a really incredible George moment that kind of sounds like no other George moments that have come up so far. It's a really fascinating listen. The whole thing I don't think is worth listening to, because that middle section, you can get the same songs that sound much better on the release I'm going to talk about next, or on like other releases that sound better. But Stinkfoot and Redunzel, those solos are fantastic. And the Montana solo is fantastic. And George's improv thing, which closes it out. Like, this is on YouTube. Pretty sure the tracks are indexed. Go check out Stinkfoot. Check out Redunzel. Understand the sound's going to be rough, but it'll be worth it for the solos. Skip ahead to Montana, and then finish off with George. Fantastic stuff. And that would be my second favorite show from this little Ohio run. My first of these two is this one, the one that appeared in the Apostrophe box set. This show is from November 20th, 1974, the following night from the one I just talked about, Dayton, Ohio. I have a full video on this for the apostrophe release, but I would argue that this is just your typically great fall 1974 show. Pretty typical set list by this point. I don't think there's any one single solo or performance on here that is maybe like absolutely a must hear. The Redunzel solo is pretty fantastic. Kind of follows in line as the one from the previous show where it's just your standard Redunzel. When entropy threatens to set in, they kind of keep it together long enough where it doesn't become this sort of chaotic fall 74 thing. The Stinkfoot solo is pretty good. There's a Pygmy Twilight at the end of this. That solo is pretty awesome, though I don't think it compares to some of the ones from earlier in the tour. We don't get a room service. It goes into room service, and we get the dun 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 dun. There's a do right out back, but then Frank comes out and introduces the band, so we don't actually get the room service dynamic. At the end of the show, we do get for the encores a Don't Eat the Yellow Snow suite, so that wasn't on the first show. And the sound is fantastic, like no complaints. You get to hear those things in the middle. The Village Echidnas Don't, the Penguin to Mercy Dog Meat Girl, the Dynamo Hum, the awesome Camarillo Brillo. You get those in excellent sound quality, and those sound absolutely fantastic. And the Stinkfoot solos and the Redunzel solos are excellent. No slouch in that department. So it's a really, really great show that doesn't have one of those just truly unique moments that maybe bumps it up just a little bit. I will say something about Frank's sound on this. It is interesting. He is the only guitar player on this tour, and there are interesting moments like throughout like Dogmeat or Village or like that run where there's no solos when he's playing rhythm, and the way he's mixed, you can hear what he's doing as a rhythm guitar player a little more prominently than in other mixes, which I think is always pretty interesting. I also think the sound of his guitar, the tone that he has on his guitar is kind of strange. And it always takes me a little bit to kind of come around and get used to it, but then I eventually do. But I teach kindergarten, and we have all this yarn because my kids fingering it all the time. And there is this special type of yarn that they love that it's like your typical yarn in the middle. It's rather thin but firm, but it's got these. It's purposely frayed, and in the frayedness, there's always silver threads or like sort of like sparkly threads that give it this pop, color wise. That's what his guitar sounds like. Like there is this core tone that is like tight and like just very driven and metal and a tight fuzz, but then there's this just all this extraneous noise that seems to like emanate out from his playing that at first is a distraction, but after a while you're like, okay, I just got to get used to this, and then it's pretty good. But it's a weird guitar sound. But yeah, this is just a solid, fantastic show. Tush Tush Tush, Stinkfoot, Redunzel, both excellent solos. The Redunzel, you're pretty typical, just slowly building, like straightforward solo. Village, nappy solo. The saxophone sounds great on this. Echidnas, Don't You Ever. Penguin, excellent Penguin solo. Fantastic Penguin solo. Really nice and long. Frank gets a chance to just kind of stretch out and explore. I've said this before. I will say it again for the rest of this tour. Cosmic Debris and Penguin solos are consistent highlights because it doesn't seem like Frank's trying to do anything other than just enjoy playing the guitar. Like he's not trying to like explore new avenues or like reinvent the wheel or completely like challenge his rhythm section. Like, hey, keep up with me. He just seems like he stays in the pocket, and this is a fantastic, let's just stay in the pocket and solo Penguin solo. Amazing. To Mercy, Dog Breath, Uncle Meat, another fantastic Building the Girl. Dynamo Hum and Camarillo Brillo. Dynamo with your audience participation. Camarillo Brillo with just that awesome rock energy to begin with, and Duke jamming out at the end. And then the one thing that kind of really elevates this, the Pygmy Twilight. I love Pygmy Twilight. This is kind of the slower, proggier, hard rock version. Solo's pretty fantastic. Not the most epic, but satisfying. And I really like, by this point, after George goes into the little Mozart tease, the jam between the Mozart tease and the drop into room service is pretty intense, and we get a little hippie riff jam, that dun 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 dun. So that's a pretty sweet. So the Pygmy Twilight, definitely maybe one of the highlights of this. I can't say it's like a must here, but I do think probably my favorite thing on here, maybe the Redunzel solo. Then we get a room service, and then we get the Don't Eat the Yellow Snow suite for the encore with a nice, fun Nanook as always. Frank's having a good time. It's just a solidly consistent, great show. 11, 20, 74. But yeah, where would I rank both of these if I had to rank these? I have my list not up, but you can see it right there. I have this one, the 1121, at number 5. The sound quality is fantastic. The performances are solid. I just think the ones above it, even if the sound quality is not as strong, there are moments in each of their shows that are really just like, okay, they don't play this that often in this tour. This is really a special moment. Check those out. And then the Columbus one drops all the way to 11. As strong as the Redunzel and the Stinkfoot and the Montana and the George are, the sound quality is rough. It's not a complete show. Even when the sound quality is good, you're getting these horrible drops that were kind of frustrating. But I really do, I'm going to reiterate, it's on YouTube. Check out the Stinkfoot and Redunzel solos, skip to the end and check out the Montana and George solos. I think they're just fantastic and they're worth hearing. And if maybe somewhere down the line there's a box set of highlights from the 74 tour and anything they have in the vault that sounds good, they can like just give us like a compilation, like a You Can't Do That on Stage Anymore 74 version, because I'm sure there are some just even more fantastic solos out there. But anyways, yeah, that's all I got. Ohio, 1974. This is Fowler's. If Fowler breaks his hand, Tom Fowler breaks his hand after this. So things get really interesting as we move forward and we get some other bass players coming in. So it's going to be fun. We're going to finish out this tour in a fun way. All right. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on these shows, on this tour, on these releases. You know how it works. Subscribe, like, share, comment. And thanks for watching. Peace. Talk to you later.